Long story short, Octopath Traveler 2 is genuinely the worst RPG I have ever played. After I played the game for about 10 hours, I already knew that I wasn't going to like it. But I clenched my teeth and I finished it, hoping to find just a crumb of fun along the way.
What a waste of time.
It came in at just under 60 total hours of playtime, and I think this could honestly shave off 45 hours and you wouldn't miss anything. Here's a quick rundown of Octopath Traveler 2. You begin by choosing to start as one of 8 characters. You then travel around and gather up the remaining 7 group members. You can have 4 members active on your team at once, and you'll engage in random turn-based battles as you travel around the map. Each character has a fixed job or class, and those jobs come with preset abilities that you'll slowly unlock as you level up. For example, one character is a scholar who specializes in area of effect magic spells, while another is a thief who debuffs enemies and steals items. Each character has their own isolated story that is completely separate from the other characters.
No!
You will have to travel around and do the full story for all 8 characters in order to beat the game. The unique battle system in this game is that every enemy has a list of weaknesses underneath them. If you inflict the damage type that matches those weaknesses a sufficient number of times, enemies will become stunned. Also, your team generates BP every turn, which is a resource that can be spent to power up an ability of your choice. After so much time in combat, each character has a latent power skill that specifically augments their playstyle. You'll eventually unlock the ability to equip a secondary job on each character, which generally consists of the other 7 jobs that the character doesn't start with. You'll get access to a majority of their skills when you do this, as well as a slight stat boost and access to that job's weapons. So let's return to my opening statement. This is the worst RPG I have ever played, and I meant it when I said that. Let me ask you, did anything I said in that summary sound original to you? Did you struggle with the concept of classes like warrior and mage and equipable items? Have you ever heard of enemies having weaknesses to specific damage types? Have you ever heard of random battles and ultimate abilities that build after so much time in combat? I've played RPGs my entire life. While they're not all comparable to the playstyle of Octopath Traveler 2, they're similar enough that I can feel somewhat justified in critiquing this game's quality. Just to name a few, I've played Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy, Expedition 33, Iron Oath, every single mainline Pokemon game, Tintin, Bravely Default, Baldur's Gate, Tyranny, Shadowrun Dragonfall, Pillars of Eternity, Divinity Original Sin, Rogue Trader, Gloomhaven, Stick of Truth. The list goes on. The problem with Octopath Traveler 2 is that it plays like it's the first RPG ever made. I would argue that Final Fantasy actually has more fleshed out combat systems and story than Octopath Traveler 2. As a matter of fact, I'm going to attack both of these points, the combat and the story. First off, there are only about 12 skills per job. I would argue 50% of those are immediately able to be removed or have incredibly niche purposes. A good example of underwhelming skills would be things like buffs. All buffs of the same type overlap. For example, anything that buffs attack damage is considered the same buff. So if you have one skill that can buff just attack, but you have another skill that buffs attack and defense, which one are you going to use? The answer becomes obvious. Many of these skills just don't seem to have the same level of damage scaling as other abilities. It will quickly become obvious which characters are the damage dealers, and it's not even close. One character, similarly equipped to other characters, can pull off combos doing 10 times the damage of other characters, and I am not exaggerating. And this isn't me metagaming. I'm not looking up guides or anything. I'm just playing naturally, and I stumbled upon this. I'm sure everyone has a similar experience. At first I thought I just discovered some sort of OP combination, but I began to realize that the bosses are extremely difficult. And because of that, it almost feels like the game sets you up to play this way. If you don't use these overpowered abilities, I don't know how you're supposed to defeat some of these encounters. The damage of other characters is just so much lower that there's no way for them to reasonably compete. Let me give you an example. The Scholar has the typical Fire, Ice, Lightning Mage spells. These do reasonable damage to the entire enemy group and are always area of effect. But the Scholar's latent power allows him to concentrate the spell onto one target for increased effect. Additionally, the Scholar can empower himself to have any spell hit 3 times in one turn. In order to activate that skill, the Scholar must spend 3 BP. So in order to activate this combo, here's what we would have to do. You need to wait 3 turns in order to cast the spell Empowerment, since it costs 3 BP. Then you would have to wait another 4 turns, since there's a 1 turn cooldown for generating BP, to generate another 3 BP, to then use the latent power to cast a triple hit, single target focused magic damage spell. So this takes a total of 7 turns to set up and enable this attack. You won't be able to do anything like this again without a similar level of setup, since you need the buff, the BP, and the latent power to all be available at the same time. Meanwhile, on the Warrior, he has a natural attack that strikes 4 times. You can spend 3 BP to do a 4-hit combo on a single target for tremendous amounts of damage. No latent power needed, and no buff needed. Any buffs you add are just additional damage on top of that. One character has the ability to transfer their BP to another character. If you could choose to send that BP to the Warrior or the Scholar, based on what we just discussed, which one would you pick? If you said Warrior, you'd be right, because now you can use this 4-hit combo almost every turn and absolutely obliterate anything that stands in your way. Almost every other character plays a support role in comparison to these 2 attackers. The Thief debuffs armor and boosts attack damage. The Merchant will transfer BP to teammates. The Hunter will debuff enemy speed and buff ally crit chance. The Dancer will buff attack damage. The Alchemist will heal and buff. And the Cleric will heal and buff. Buffs and debuffs do not last long. They, at default, only last 2 turns, which includes the turn you cast it. Using BP will increase the duration by the number of BP spent. The problem here is if you don't use BP, then you basically need to buff every turn. If you use BP on buffing, then you'll have to wait to rebuild that BP in order to get an attack in. By that point, the buff will tick down, and you'll be right back to where you started. So the ideal time to buff is just before a big attack. So if you buff at 2 BP, and then at 3 BP you activate the attack, the buff will fall off the same turn, and then you can buff again after that. The problem with this is that if you buff, and you have to do anything else besides attack for whatever reason, then the buff gets wasted. This is extremely problematic for boss fights, because practically every boss has the ability to change resistances, activate immunities, stun your team, or nearly one-shot you on every single hit. The bosses are so strong that I don't know how you would reasonably fight them and not use the overpowered skills. Genuinely, almost every boss I fought had skills that would take my entire team below 10% life in just one hit. Bosses often have a charging ultimate attack that needs to be stopped by stunning them, which can only be done through attacking the specific weaknesses. If this skill wasn't stopped, I would frequently get caught in a death loop of reviving and dying over and over, or having to turn my entire team to healing in a fruitless effort to stabilize. Bosses often need anywhere from 8 to 12 hits to their weakness in order for them to be stunned. Every single meaningful boss in this game has the ability to rotate or block their weaknesses. The problem is a boss can come right out of a stun, regenerate their full stacks of protection, and then immediately begin charging their ultimate. This would mean that you would need to activate the 8 to 12 separate hits of the weakness in order to stun this boss before the next turn. Most characters don't even have the ability to hit more than once in a turn. Additionally, this would require them to not do their other duties like buffing and healing. In Octopath Traveler 2, a boss being able to block or shift their weaknesses while charging up an ultimate attack basically means You can't engage with the combat in its intended way. You're better off ignoring the weaknesses and only using them to your advantage if the opportunity presents itself. Find a strategy that consistently works and just do that every fight. For me, it was the 4-hit combo from the warrior. I didn't care if they were weak to that attack or not. It was getting used every turn. I was better off spending my time buffing everyone's resistance and trying to keep everyone healed up to survive the ultimate attack than trying to stun the enemy through just a wall of shifting resistances. There's simply nothing compelling or original about this combat. I do not say this lightly. This story is garbage. I'm going scorched earth here. I'm going to spoil whatever is necessary to get my point across. But trust me, you are not missing anything. All 8 characters have an independent story with 0 overlap. There are no moments where any part of their individual stories intersect or impact another character's story. It's as if the writers just came up with 8 different plot points and just put them in the game. There's no cohesion, there's no teamwork, there's nothing original about any of this. Your teammates are just background characters so out of place when it comes to whoever's in the spotlight. Every character has the most evil, over-the-top, mustache-twirling villain that you've ever seen.
Facts are malleable things, you see. The powerful can bend them to their will. Provided they have enough coin, that is. I'm rather fond of coin. It can't be bent the same way, see? Hell, I'd do anything for it. It has given me all you see before you.
Quit stalling.
We have greedy industrial tycoon, the scientist who takes his experiments too far, the evil king who wants to subjugate the world, and, I can barely say this without laughing, cultists who worship darkness.
For the light shall fade.
The problem with all these stories is that they're designed to just waste your time. They all reveal their major enemy in the first act, and then you spend 90% of the game defeating middlemen to just get to the bad guy that has been revealed from the start. The only character that seemed to have a somewhat compelling story was Temenos, the cleric, because his story revolved around his position in the church and he was solving a murder mystery. He would act like Sherlock and go over clues. It was entertaining, but it had the same result as the other stories because you knew who the bad guy was from the start, and you just went through a bunch of nonsense to get there. After you complete all 8 stories, which took me nearly 50 hours, you're given the in-game storyline of defeating the darkness. This trash is so cobbled together that they just took random background NPCs from each character's individual story and made some crap up about them all being cultists to summon the great evil darkness. This is so absurd. Imagine if Star Wars revealed that C-3PO, Admiral Akbar, Chewbacca, and Sebulba are actually all masterminds behind the Sith, and they were just waiting to see if Palpatine's plan worked out. After he fails, they come together to summon the ultimate evil, and everything they had been doing up to this point was all part of the plan. This is legitimately what the story of this game is. So now you go to fight the ultimate evil, and you're never going to believe this, but after 50 hours of only using 4 characters at a time, the final fight requires you to use all 8 characters. Fantastic. So if you haven't been leveling them up, and you got some characters that are a little weaker, you're now going to be punished for it. I had to back out and go level them up and buy different gear for all of them. This end chapter being so cobbled together, and it being one of the only times that all 8 characters actually interact with each other, makes it seem like it's the only meaningful part of the game. All of the previous 8 characters' individual stories play so little into the end result here that you could completely remove them, and I don't think it would make much of a difference. This game could be 5 to 10 hours long and it would have the same result. It's just a bunch of filler, flashbacks, long pauses, and names being said over and over. Here's a few other things that really agitated me with the game. The secondary jobs will overwrite the outfit of the primary job. So no matter what the character looks like at default, as soon as you put a secondary job on there, it changes their appearance. There's no way to affect this cosmetic, and I think some of the secondary appearances looks absolutely ridiculous. It is so dumb that you can have a scholar decked out in robes and then put an outfit on him for a secondary job that makes him look like he's a steampunk cosplayer. Now, I get that some people are going to like this, but the fact that you can't change it in modern day gaming just feels so lazy. There's no way to turn off random battles. So as you run around the map, you're frequently going to revisit old areas where you drastically outlevel enemies. And if you don't have certain stuff equipped, you are going to run into an encounter every 5 feet. And even though you can kill these enemies in one ability, it just becomes so frustrating to have to constantly fight encounters as you run around. Particularly when the encounters offer you nothing. There are non-stop flashbacks during the story. You will constantly be retold what is going on, even if it just happened 5 seconds ago.
I will forge ahead to where my friends await. Friends await.
Gear management is a mega pain in the ass. There is no reason to use all 8 characters until the very end of the game. So when you swap a character out, you typically want to put the best gear that you have at the time on that character. There's no easy way to do this. You have to remove all the gear from one character and then place it all on the character you're swapping to. And this process is frustrating, confusing, it's not intuitive, there's no easy way to do it. I just can't believe that a modern game doesn't have this. Just to be clear, this existed all the way back in Final Fantasy VII, where you could use the switch function to swap all of the equipment from one character onto another character so that you could simply replace a teammate at will without having to go through inventory management every time. Octopath Traveler 2 just lacks anything that provides some sort of soul to this game that makes it stand out in your mind. I'm going to compare it to a recent game that's very similar called Bravely Default. If you haven't played this game, what happens is, in Bravely Default, when you activate an ultimate ability, which is similar to the latent power in Octopath Traveler 2, it will have a little cutscene with the character, and then a theme song will start playing that relates to whichever character used the ultimate ability. This is nothing that's going to blow your socks off, but it just proves that Bravely Default was actually trying to do something that made it feel special.
I've seen worse methods.
If there were some suggestions I were to make for the game, for God's sake, make XP share between the entire team. If they want me to swap characters out, stop making it such a chore to swap the characters. Buffs should last longer, 4 turns at least. I'm a bit shocked I even have to say this, but there's just no way for you to make compelling builds when you need to buff every single turn. The stories need to overlap. It's not like the characters are optional. If I'm required to gather all 8 characters and there are no story choices, why in the world do the stories not have intersections? Every other chapter in this game should be characters teaming up with each other or teaming up with specific characters to converge on points in their life where their paths overlap. Could you imagine if you had a boss fight that was 2 bosses, one from each character's story, that both happened at the same time? For example, what if the Scholar and the Cleric both met together and fought 2 bosses at the same time and we basically had a double boss battle? Way too many games ignore the fact that this is a video game and not a movie. I want video game stuff to relay the story. I don't want movie stuff to relay the story. There are moments where you will meet NPCs and they will say something like, "I will help you on your adventure." And then what happens is you walk into the building to fight the boss, and what does that NPC do? They hold off all the goons while you go and fight the boss, right? It basically has no impact on the flow of combat or anything like that. Even though you know these are powerful NPCs, and even though they do contribute to the story in that respect, because it doesn't show in the gameplay, it feels very boring, and it just doesn't feel like I'm playing a video game. How much cooler would it be if these NPCs actually showed up in the fights? Imagine if there's some boss that goes to charge up his ultimate ability, and all of his weaknesses get blocked out. There's no way for me to stun him, and your whole team gets taken down to 1 health. Oh no, we're about to lose, what am I supposed to do? And then just before the ultimate attack comes in, an NPC just comes flying off of the screen, takes the hit, and breaks the shield so that the enemy can now be weakened again. It's the same effect as doing nothing, but it's the principle that they're showing it during the gameplay, because they're using the medium of a video game to relay the story that this NPC is helping me. It is way more compelling to see it like that than to just have an NPC tell me outside of combat, I'll be there to help you, and then when the dust settles, they go, whew, that was a tough fight. That is such a boring and lazy way to make a game. I don't even know why they're making a game at this point. I don't really know what the difference is between my ability to critique this game and how other people view it, but sometimes it's quite a surprise. I picked it up because the Steam reviews made it sound like it was really good. I don't have a Switch, so I couldn't play it until it came to Steam, and you read some of these reviews and they just make it sound phenomenal. There's a guy here that says, the more I played, the more hooked I got.
Harvey, I didn't think you'd make it. Harvey.
The story gets deeper and the characters grow on you.
Let us decide once and for all who the true star is. Come, Agnia. Let's give them a show they won't soon forget.
And by the end, it broke my heart in the best way.
It's over.
Absolutely worth playing. How in the world does this person come to this conclusion? I'm not saying this person can't enjoy this game, but I would never leave a review with such high praise for a game that plays like this. Octopath Traveler 2 is the worst RPG I have ever played.